Hello and welcome once again to Rasslin Memories Then and Now on Pioneer 90.1 FM, KSRQ. We're also available online for the masses to devour. You can listen to us live at radionorthland.org. And if you missed out on the live recording, you missed out on the live show, you can go to radionorthland.org. We've got a Rasslin Memories Then and Now page. You can check out all the archived interviews from the past 6 years of Rasslin Memories. We are well into our 7th season, so you can check that out. We got our SoundCloud page, very convenient, very easy to grab, and we're also on the TuneIn app if you want to listen live on your smartphone. You can take that thing everywhere and listen to Rasslin Memories. Hi, I'm Glen Braget. The grizzled veteran Mike McCurdy, he's on assignment, and he's promised he's got a good guest, a real whopper he's going to be reeling in. But I don't know. He's got big shoes to fill here because I've got a great guest. And this guy I watched back in the 1980s, around the mid-1980s, when I was really becoming just immersed in pro wrestling. I started watching in the early 1980s, around 82, AWA. So I was about in my 3rd, 4th year of wrestling, being a fan, just being a young kid. And I remember this guy because he was a guy who did the honors for a lot of the big stars of the AWA. I mean, he didn't exactly win a lot of matches or even come close sometimes, but he made a lot of those guys look very good. And we got to remember those guys, the enhancement talent for all of their wonderful contributions to pro wrestling. He broke out of that, though. He didn't just wasn't settling for the guy who was going to be taking the fall. No. He moved on into other endeavors in pro wrestling. He put on a mask. He was with the Texas Hangmen. He made it to WCW in a big tag team. He was Mean Mike. He's made it to Japan. He's been around the world and back again. And you know what? He got out of the pro wrestling business and had a second life in a successful business. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm very excited to talk about what he's doing today as well. Of course, yesterday. We're going to talk with the man himself. I knew him as Mike Richards on the AWA television network. Mr. Mike Moran. Thank you, Mike, for being a guest here on Rasslin Memories Then and Now.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Glenn. Holy cow, that was a lot of good stuff. I'm glad you moved on from the enhancement talent to actually becoming a hangman. That certainly sounds a little more impressive, at least.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, this is just kind of the movements you made in your pro wrestling career, and you have so much that we can cover here. I just didn't want to have you be limited as the underneath guy. I mean, there's more to your career than that, my friend.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and the bottom line is you got to pay your dues. You get in the business, you start out as an indie guy, then you work your way up to an enhancement guy, and then hopefully eventually you get your break. And that's why we had to put the masks on, because we had been, my partner and I both, he was Rick Gantner, I was Mike Richards. We were doing jobs for so long. When we finally presented the Texas Hangman gimmick to Greg, he's like, this is great because you guys are wearing hoods. We can do this. And knock on wood, they pushed us pretty hard, which was awesome.
Oh, absolutely. But before then, though, I want to go back and just talk a little bit about how you got involved in the pro wrestling business. Were you a fan growing up? I know you were in the Midwest as well as I. You couldn't avoid the AWA. You couldn't avoid pro wrestling. But how big of a fan were you? And really, what was it that grabbed you about pro wrestling enough to the point that you wanted to get into the ring and do this, for a good part of the younger years of your life?
Yeah, I was a huge fan. I had always watched wrestling on TV, but I went and saw my first show in Milwaukee at the arena. My friend had some tickets. I was only like maybe 13, maybe 12. And once I saw it live, I was addicted. I remember actually being at the bus stop after the show and saying to my friend, I am going to be a pro wrestler. And from that day on, I lived, eat, and breathed wrestling. I would go and get all the magazines from the pharmacy whenever they came out. I built a ring in my basement, a makeshift ring, and we had belts. It was called the BWA, Basement Wrestling Association. And of course, I was a champion because I was the booker. And I lived in my neighborhood. I was known as the kid that was going to be a pro wrestler, and I'd wait out and back of the buildings for the guys and take pictures with my one-step camera, and I put it this way: it was in my blood once I saw it live, definitely.
Now, who were the guys that you liked? Were you a guy that cheered on the faces, or did you have that soft spot in your heart for the heels? Because, I mean, but whether it was a heel or face, these guys just seemed larger than life in those days.
They really did. It was crazy. I mean, I'd see these guys come up, and it just was so cool to see them close up. But for me, not surprisingly, I guess, when you look at how it ended up, my favorite was always the mask guys. I loved the Super Destroyer, and then my most favorite was the Super Destroyer 2, who later became Sergeant Slaughter. And then later on, of course, I got to meet him. Never got to work him, but got to meet him many times. And he actually gave my other Hangman partner a tryout match for WWE. So that was kind of a cool circular thing. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, Super Destroyer 2 was my favorite. I didn't really have a whole lot of favorites besides that. I just loved the business altogether, and I knew as soon as I got old enough I was getting in the business.
Mm-hmm. Now, where did that door get open for you as far as getting, breaking into the business, getting the training? Who did you seek out to help you get into the business, just to find your way? Because, I mean, pro wrestling, especially back in those days, because it was still very strong in the kayfabe, was a very close-knit sort of, a business where they didn't play too kindly with outsiders, and if you had to have some pretty strong stuff to just make it past the initial proceedings, let alone get the proper training. What was your pro wrestling story like in regards to training?
I got lucky, actually, to be honest with you, because you're right. Back then, it was the kayfabe was so strong. I mean, they didn't want to smarten you up at all. But my stepdad actually knew Herman Schaefer, who I don't know if you know who he is. He was a TV job guy for Vern. He was like 6'6", 350-pound guy. He knew him from a bar that he went to, and he actually, when I was 17, he introduced me to him at that bar. And they used to run shows at this place called the Fed Hall in Milwaukee every 3 weeks on a Sunday afternoon, where they would be the stars. It was all the TV guys from Vern that would be stars on their show. And he said, if you want to come help put the ring up in the day, get in the ring, we'll see what you got. And I was like, okay. And I went and did that. And because I had been practicing so long as a kid, I kind of had all the basics down. I didn't know how to bump. I didn't know how to hit the ropes. But I knew how, I knew how to chain wrestle, and I knew how to, my foot movement. And he just took me under his wing, but he was so big, there was only so much he could do. So then eventually Jake the Milkman Millman stepped in, and Tom Rocky Stone, and those guys kind of refined me.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Jake the Milkman Milliman and Tom Rocky Stone. You know what? Growing up watching AWA, me and my friends and my cousins, I mean, those guys seem just as big to us as the guy that they were wrestling and doing the honors for, because those guys, they were always such a presence on the weekly television, and being able to get into those TV tapings back in the old days of the TV studios in Minneapolis. Now, I want to talk about getting in, and you talked about how you broke into the business and your training. What was those first matches like, and how did you find your way into I mean, you mentioned the guys before, but how did you get your way into the AWA and finding yourself on television, actually working with some of these big stars of the day that you watched from the stands?
Well, my first match was in November 17th of 1982, and that was after Herman, Stone, and Jake kind of refined me. I wrestled this guy named Bad Brain Lucas at that Fed Hall, the same place I helped put the ring up to get my foot in the door. And then what happened is Stone and Jake stepped in, refined me, and it was really up to Stone, because Stone, believe it or not, had actually been on the road in the Louisiana territory for Watts, and he had been in the territory for Geigel in Central States as Steve Hall, which is his real name. So he had connections with Vern and with WWE, and it was really up to him. So once I was ready, he brought me up to do TV, and I was Mike Madigan when I first started wrestling at the Fed Hall and all those local indie shows. And then when I went up to do Vern, he just said, well, now you're Mike Richards, and hey, Stone was the boss at the time. So I became Mike Richards, and he brought me up there, and you got paid $1.50 for their TV taping, whether you worked one time or three times, because they would do 3 tapings in one night at the studio. And sometimes you might be like the second match on the first taping, the fourth match on the second taping, and the first match on the third taping. And it didn't matter how many times you worked, you got paid $1.50. But you know what? I would have done it for free, because I was wrestling, literally locking up with some of the guys I grew up idolizing. I mean, that's priceless.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at some of the matches online here of the times you worked. Just a couple of guys we want to talk about who you worked with when you started up in '83 into '84, and this was right around the time where the AWA was still getting some pretty damn good houses too. This was right at the beginning of Vince McMahon starting to put his pieces. Vince McMahon Jr. Buying the company from his dad, so expansion was starting to seep into the landscape of pro wrestling, but still at that time when you were getting in doing television jobs, the AWA was doing decent houses. I mean, it was still very much one of the stronger companies in the country, quite easily the number 2 to the NWA and what they were doing at that moment in time.
I agree. I think, I mean, at that time they were really strong still. I mean, TV was strong, the house shows were strong, a lot of, you know, as Mike Richards, I didn't do a lot of house shows, but occasionally I would get thrown a bone because with Vern or with Greg, because he was kind of helping out then, if you were a good hand, they would throw you some house shows just to kind of say, hey, we do appreciate what you're doing. But I mean, I just doing those TVs, one of the first times I went out there, I got to work Nick Bockwinkel. Now, this is a kid who grew up watching Nick defend that strap. Can you imagine how surreal it was when I'm at the studio where I watched the shows for years, and I'm locking up with Nick Bockwinkel? That was pretty special, and I got to work the Freebirds, Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen, Wahoo, the Masked Superstar, Tommy Rich, the Fabs, the Road Warriors, Greg Gagne, Ventura. I mean, the names are endless. I mean, that's just priceless. It was awesome. It was awesome. I honestly would have done it for free, but I took the $150 pretty happy.
Well, you and Tom Stone had a chance, too, to wrestle Hulk Hogan in a 2-on-1 handicap, and this was around 1983. And the unique thing about Hogan was, you know, when Vern initially brought him in, he hooked him up with Johnny Valiant, and they were going to keep him sort of as a heel, but it was one of those things where the fans really kind of dictated the flow, one of those instances where Hogan was just so over that they had no other option but to actually benefit from a turn and making him this giant babyface. But you had a chance to kind of work in the ring with him as well in those TV tapings.
Yeah, I'm actually impressed that you know that, because I've been looking for that darn tape forever. How did you even find out about that?
Well, I went online I did some research for the future.
Amazing, because I mean, I've been looking for that video forever. But I'll take it a step further. Yeah, me and Stone worked him. But believe it or not, I also got to work him in a singles match at Wrestling at the Chase in St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, that was crazy. And that was, again, through Stone, because Stone had connections with everybody. So he used to bring us, not only were we doing TV tapings in Minneapolis, we were going down to Kansas City and doing tapings at the Kemper and all around there. And we were also doing tapings at the Wrestling at the Chase, which was really cool because that's kind of an iconic building. And I just got the luck of the draw. I got to work Hogan in a singles. And believe it or not, this is how green he was. After the match, when we got back in the dressing room, he got scolded out unbelievably because they yelled at him because he let me do too much, and he even let me mirror him over. And, you know, at his size, he shouldn't have done that, but he was green, and so was I.
You know,
so he actually got scolded.
Oh, wow. You know, and it's so amazing that St. Louis could be just such a pro wrestling power and just be that standalone town, because it really wasn't a territory per se, because, you know, later on Central States was in and around that area as well. But St. Louis was kind of the thing that shined in and of itself on its own. And you could definitely see that in the talent that was able to be brought in, of course, with Sam Muchnick, a longtime promoter there, and Larry Matisic also learning under the wings of Sam. So that was one of those unique places where you could get like an all-star game of guys, and to be able to be in that locker room and work, that must have been just a heck of a thrill for you. I mean, early on, you being still very young in your career.
It was crazy. That was like, I'm guessing 84. Yeah, it was weird. I mean, it was such a mixture too. It was like Hulk Hogan was there, Crusher Blackwell was there, Blackjack Lanza was there, but then you had guys from like other territories there too. You know, Dickie Murdoch's there. It was the Bruiser. It was very cool because it was such a mixture of guys. It kind of got me out of my zone of where I had been with Vern, and it was very cool. And then later on, I actually went to the Central States territory again through Stone. He got me booked for Bob Geigel, and I did an actual summer in the Central States territory as Mike Madigan. That was my first territory, and that was really cool because one time we did work the Kiel Auditorium, which again was a melting pot because Iceman Parsons was there, Rufus R. Jones was there. I was in a 6-man. It was me, Gypsy Joe, and I don't even remember who my partner was, but against Buzz Tyler and the Rockers. Well, not the Rockers. It was Marty Jannetty and Tommy Rogers, who actually was one of the RPMs, but later he became Tommy Lane. But yeah, it was very cool. I mean, that area was just such a cool area because they had so many guys from so many different areas. Very cool.
Now, what was it like to work for Bob Geigel, you know, around in that time when he was a big part of Central States and also the National Wrestling Alliance? When I think of Kansas wrestling, Kansas City, I think of Central States, I think of Bob Geigel, and I also think of Bulldog Bob Brown. Talk a little bit about Geigel, and did you have a chance to also to be around when Bob was in the territory?
Yeah, I honestly wrestled Bob Brown at the Chase too. The only matches I had at the Chase was Bob Brown, Angelo Mosca Jr., and Hulk Hogan. And then the other times it was, was the TV tapings and things like that. But it was cool territory. But I mean, honestly, you didn't make a lot of money. We all lived in Kansas City, and we would just outshoot from there. And it was my first territory. I probably wasn't ready. Stone got me booked there. The only reason I got booked there is because there was a touring battle royal in Kansas City at the Kemper, and Stone brought a bunch of us down from Milwaukee, and they were short on a guy, and Bob Geigel said, is there a guy who's your best guy? And he said, Mike, and he put me with our crews, and we had a good match, and he said, if you ever want to come back, you're welcome. So I called, and that's back in the days when you didn't have cell phones. So I called him, and he booked me, and I came in, and it was okay. It was great. It was a great experience. The coolest thing that came out of it is me and Marty. That was Marty's first territory, Marty Jannetty. And him and I became very tight, and we've been friends now since, he lived in the house I actually live in here. He was my roommate at one time, and him and I have been tight now for 30-some years. So that was the good thing that came out of it. But put it this way, it was a tough territory, and you didn't make a lot of money. And when I finished up, Marty drove me to the bus station, the Greyhound station, to get home. So it wasn't very prosperous, but it was awesome.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, we're going to get out of the wrestling of the Chase thing, but you mentioned that you worked Angelo Mosca Jr. Now, the knock on him was, he was a second-generation guy. He may have been pushed a little bit too far, too fast, too soon sort of thing. What can you remember from working with Angelo Mosca Jr.? Because he was a little bit raw. When you're watching it, I mean, I've been watching some of the stuff on WWE Network of when he was in Mid-Atlantic. A little bit raw, but then again, he kind of had a rocket, the rocket thing was attached to him, and he was the lightning bolt, and he was ready to go. But what do you remember working with Angelo Mosca Jr.? Like I said, there's been a knock on him for many years because just too much too soon.
Yeah, I think the reason, again, I'll keep in mind I was pretty green at the time. But I was more composed in the ring than he was when we worked. I mean, he was just blowing up, and he was just super. He was one of those guys that was just super intense, and he just couldn't relax. And I think it was just too much too soon, and he just didn't have a grasp of it, and he was pushed into a spot he wasn't ready for. And he was a very nice guy, but I just think he just, unfortunately, sometimes in this business, they push guys too. I mean, I could tell you endless stories about guys I've worked that were just not ready for the spot they were in, and I was much better than they were, but because of their size or because of their name, they got a push, and most times they fail. Sometimes they figure it out,
Now, I want to talk a little bit about another, I guess it was a consortium of promoters that wanted to take on Vince McMahon around 1984 into 85. And they had the best of intentions, but again, when you get so many personalities, especially on the promotion side, it was lucky if they could order lunch, let alone promote all of these wonderful guys that were in this group of wrestlers. I want to talk about the Pro Wrestling USA, and you ended up working some tapings there against some pretty good competition here. I'm looking at the Masked Superstar you got to be in the ring with, Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors, to guys like Kendo Nagasaki and Butch Reed. You talk about getting some more seasoning. I mean, that Pro Wrestling USA, though short-lived, did offer some opportunities at those tapings to get all of the wrestling at the Chase, opportunities for different guys from around the different territories.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, and Masked Superstar, again, being a mask mark that I was, that was a huge thing for me. I mean, wrestling a guy that I grew up was one of the few mask guys that I liked. I mean, it was awesome, yeah. And that was a good time. That was a really good time. And it's funny because my partner, Bo Payne, who was the original other Hangman, Rick Gantner, if you look at that same time, he wrestled the Road Warriors on that same taping I did, but his partner was Rob Steiner, who eventually became one of the Steiner brothers. So it's just so funny how, again, paying your dues. At that time, he was just a jobber paying his dues, too, or enhancement talent. But, yeah, that was a really good time. We were also doing WWE tape because of Stone, he knew Terry Garvin from Kansas City. Mm-hmm. So not only were we doing the Vern tapings, but we also started doing the WWE Challenge and Superstars tapings, which was awesome, too. I mean, we went over there, and those were all over the country. So you'd get paid trans to go there, and it was still $150. I don't know why the $150 was the standard job.
It just seems so odd that just keeps being the recurring theme for the price here. It's like, how much? That's our $150 boys over there.
Yeah. Let's get the $150, guys. It doesn't matter if they get killed or not. That's what they're getting paid, and I don't care how. The only good thing about WWE was like you got paid trans, whereas like in other words, Vern would pay a $150, but you just drove up to Minneapolis, wherever the tapings were, and you never got trans. For WWE, let's say they were doing tapings at the Louisville Garden. Well, you get whoever drove would get an extra probably $500 in gas because they would pay that gladly because it would cost more to fly us. So you drive there and you do your tapings, but there I got to work the Hart Foundation, I worked Demolition, One Man Gang, Greg Valentine, Ted DiBiase, Rick Rude, Haku, Big Boss. I was actually Big Boss Man's tryout match because they knew I was a good hand, and he had just come in from being, I believe, Ray Traylor in WCW, and it was literally the first time he did that gimmick, and I worked him somewhere in the East Coast. But I did the match with him, and I actually got a whopping $50 bonus because I did so good. But I was his tryout match, and he got hired, which was great because he was a very nice guy.
I see you also had a chance to work with a guy from the bygone era, Killer Khan. Of course, I think of Killer Khan, I think of the old wrestling magazine covers of him with the angle where the Andre broken leg. What was? I mean, that's a fascinating character because he just had that larger-than-life cartoon sort of vibe to him. What was like? You got a chance to work with him a couple of occasions on some tapings. What was he like to work with in the ring, though, for you?
It was cool. He was very easy, actually. He was really easy. He did that big flying knee drop from the top, or sometimes a second, which was super scary because he's such a big guy, and you're laying there and you're just saying, "Please, please, don't kill me." But he was actually very easy, very nice. The only thing about him that I didn't like really is because he spit that green mist.
Oh yeah.
And so then you come back and you got like this green face, and then you're walking through all the boys, and they're all kind of giving you that look like awkward, so it was a little weird, but you always got an extra $50 bonus, which wasn't very much, but I guess at the time I thought it was, but you always got a $50 bonus for anything special. You'd get a $50 bonus. If you had to put the snake on you, you got a $50 bonus. If you had to get your hair cut, you got a $300 bonus from Beefcake. And if you got the mist spit in your face, you get extra $50. I guess it's $50 to get the spit in your face. Doesn't sound like a lot, but at the time it was decent. But it was easy. He was great. He was very nice.
Well, when I think about the haircutting, I think about Chris Curtis when Beefcake got him. Man, that wasn't just a little off the top, man. He really did a number on him. One of many that fell victim to that. But man, that was out of all the haircuts, man. He got him so good in the front. It was just insane. He looked like a clown.
That was the first one, and that was in Louisville, I believe. But I was there. And it was crazy because, after that, like Frankie DeFalco and a bunch of guys, I never got it because I was kind of like a face with WWE, so I never really worked with the heels. But yeah, Chris got that, and I drove with Chris. And it was so funny because Chris had a wedding to go to that weekend.
Oh, no.
And he's like, "Man, I got good news and bad news for my wife." He goes, because you got paid like an extra $300. And at the time, $300 was a lot of money. And he goes, "Oh man, she's going to be happy about the $300, but she is not going to be happy that I'm coming to the wedding bald." I mean, he got shaved bald because what you saw on TV after that, they just shaved him bald because he had that curly hair. You had to shave him bald. So we're walking to the car. There's no kids because he was Chris. If you knew Chris Curtis, he's got a great sense of humor. We're walking to the car, and ahead of us is King Kong Bundy, and Chris Curtis says to Bundy, he goes, "Hey, Dad, is there any way I can use the car tonight?" Baldness.
That's
so
good.
Funny. Bundy turns around and goes, "Don't call me Dad." It was awesome. It was great. But yeah, that's a true story. And yeah, I don't know how his wife reacted to that, but it's funny because this weekend I'm flying up to Milwaukee because that's where I'm from, and going to a wedding. And so this Sunday, I've actually got a get together with a bunch of the guys from the that we all did. So it's Chris is going to be there, Stone's going to be there, Jake's going to be there, Herman's going to be there, Woody Wilson, Spike Jones, just a bunch of guys that we all were AWA guys. So should be pretty cool. I haven't seen these guys in forever, so should be nice.
Yeah, I've had Chris on the program at least a couple of times here in the past 6 years, and I've really enjoyed having him on the air. Yeah, when he was promoting the book, and I hear he's expanding the book now, from what I hear, for early release next year. So we may have to get him on, maybe get a couple of you guys on, do a little roundtable.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, Chris is a great dude. He's supposed to be there Sunday, so I'm looking forward to seeing him. I literally have not talked to Chris, and I moved out of Milwaukee 20 years ago, so I probably haven't seen him in 20 years. Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh, wow.
Because I used to, that's where I grew up, but I moved here 20 years ago, so I've lost touch with a lot of the guys except for just by Facebook. But yeah, so Chris did that thing, and then like Frankie did the thing with the shaving head. But after Chris, they toned it down, and the guys would just get like a couple snips here and there.
Yeah, because that was
they still got the $300. So Chris kind of got the raw deal.
Yeah, they should have busted him up at least an extra hundo on top of the 300 for that.
Maybe two. Yeah.
Yeah, just to be on the safe side. Yes, this is Rasslin Memories Then and Now. I'm talking with Mike Moran, a.k.a. Mike Richards, Texas Hangman. He was Mean Mike and Disorderly Conduct. We're moving along through the Mike Moran story. He's still working as Mike Richards. And you mentioned working at the WWF tapings. You've done some AWA stuff in the Minneapolis days of the TV studio. But one of the things that I watched a lot of as a kid due to its coverage on ESPN and the syndicated shows was that when the AWA decided to take things out west to the Showboat in Las Vegas. Now, this wasn't the first casino that the AWA had a TV on for their ESPN show, because they did have the Tropicana in Atlantic City to get the first couple of tapings and first couple of episodes. So when they moved out west, previously they were at the Riviera, and then the Showboat all of a sudden was the place to go for these tapings. And you, of course, had an opportunity to work out there, tagging up with Rick Gantner and working various tags with others and doing the singles. Talk about getting out to the Showboat, because, man, you guys, AWA wrestlers, Sin City, my God, if you guys were going home every night early and having milk and cookies and going to bed, I'd have to call BS on that.
Well, it was cool. I mean, I got to work with a lot of different guys out there. Rock and Roll Express. I remember wrestling this really green guy, Rocky Mountain Thunder. I heard he passed.
Yes.
Back, but yeah, him, Alexis Smirnoff, and Gordienko. I mean, there was just endless guys. But that was very cool. They used to show the Showboat was where the main guys would stay, and of course, us enhancement talent would stay at a place across the street, and it was cool. I mean, guess what we were getting paid for the TV taping?
Let me guess. The $150 boys were out again?
There you go. It didn't matter if you were in Vegas or if you were in Minneapolis. You were getting $150, no matter how many you did. But the weird thing about the Showboat taping, or were that the faces were on one side of the Showboat and the heels were on the other side. And what would happen earlier in the day, we would all meet. I mean, everybody in Greg's room. So you'd have 60 guys in Greg's room, and we would just kind of go over who was working who and all that. And if you wanted to talk, because it was very still in the kayfabe thing then, and if you wanted to talk about what you were doing with who and who or whatever the case is, you could do it then. But most of the time, there's so many guys, so much going on, and I didn't need to. I mean, I already knew I could do whatever I did. I didn't need to plan anything out ahead of time. And then what would happen is there was phones, and so you'd have to call the operator at the Showboat and say, "Can you transfer me to the other dressing room?" And then they transfer you, and you just go over whatever you wanted to go through. So it was very, very unique for that tapings. But you did that. Yeah, I wrestled Tommy Rich there. I wrestled Wahoo there, Zabisco, the Ninja. It was a good time. I mean, yeah, you're right. We had a lot of fun there. I mean, on a $150 salary back then, I wasn't doing too much crazy stuff, which I did later on. But it was awesome. It was just still very cool to go out there. And I was actually there when Sags, he was wrestling and he got his front tooth knocked out. He took a post from one of the Rock and Roll Express, and that's how he lost that front tooth. I was actually there the night that happened.
Oh, amazing, cool. Amazing. When I think about, too, the AWA Showboat, I also think about a guy who in the last couple of years has kind of gained some, in his afterlife, some notoriety. I've been mentioned on a few podcasts or two because of his just overall zaniness and, when he was on the camera. I want to talk about the guy who announced and did interviews. I know that you didn't get interviewed by him per se, but he was in the mix, I guess, was Larry Nelson. Now, that was a guy that just had some energy, and we heard some of it was not exactly just artificial. But he was a guy that was just a crazy kind of a character, though, that was part of the framework of what the AWA was about in the Showboat. But I miss personalities like Larry.
I agree. Larry was great. He liked to. have his fun and, you know, loosen up before he did his thing and all that. But yeah, he was great. I mean, he was a great talent. And you know, what's really strange is when I look back at some of those old Hangman videos, late, you know, as we got to be the Hangman, Eric Bischoff interviewing us at the ringside at the Rochester tapings. Who would ever guess that would have happened? The guy who was interviewing us became the guy who was running WCW. I mean, it's just weird. But yeah, Larry Nelson was great. Honestly, although they had a lot of talent there, you know, they really did. I mean, it was the AWA at that time was still chucking away. I just wish Vern would have kind of evolved, and I think he just didn't want to. He was so kayfabe. He was so bad that literally, I'm not kidding you, one of the last shows we did for him was at St. Paul at the Civic Center, and it was, I think you might know this more than I do. It was a big show. It was like the Clash. It was a big one. Flair was there again.
Oh, it was the last Super Clash, wasn't it? The Super Clash 4?
Yes. And we worked Nord and Barbarian, which I like both those guys, but that's literally like fighting for your life. And he is so old school that literally we're trying to put our match together in the back, and he tells us we need to go into our broom closet in case like a maintenance guy walks by, and we're like, really? I mean, you know, we're at the end of the days and all that. We all knew that, but yeah, Vern was so old school. And then we get back, and Vern starts chewing me and Bull or Rick Antner out for like 20 minutes because he said that we, you know, made them look bad because we took so much. And I'm like, well, yeah, we took a lot because we needed to grab them in holds, because if we didn't, we'd probably die. You know, I didn't say that, but I was
yeah.
that. You know, I'm telling you, I mean, I like both those guys, but wrestling Norton and Nord is like wrestling a grizzly bear and an ape. I mean, they're just so big and so strong that you just do what you have to do to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Yukon Lumberjacks gimmick. I mean, geez, when you see these guys coming down just to the ringside, you know, you got Nord, who's still kind of doing a little bit of his. I guess he changed it up his little bit of his victory howl when he came to the ring. Yep. You know, he howled like the bad moon rising. But you know, that reminds me. You know, you talk about your run under the mask as part of the Texas Hangmen. Let's talk about how the Texas Hangmen team kind of came together, because it wasn't originally the AWA for which the Hangmen kind of got together. It was more. It was at the other WCW, as I like to say, out there in Chicago, a promotion that. Really kind of underappreciated for its run when it was there. Let's talk about Windy City getting under the Texas Hangmen, the Hoods, forming this tag team with Bull.
Wow, I love your knowledge. Yes, absolutely. What happened is Bull started the Hangman. He was just the Texas Hangman and just doing it on indies. And then he said, hey, man, you know, you like wearing a mask. So when I was a kid, I used to try to make masks and all that. And he goes, why don't you wear it with me? And I said, okay, we'll try it. And we did it. And we just did it on the indies, and then you're right, exactly. Eventually it went to Windy City, and then we sent that, or actually Bull sent the pictures and the stuff to Greg and said, listen, you know, we're doing this gimmick, it's doing really well, blah, 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 blah. And we were shocked that Greg actually gave us a shot, because we were thinking, you know, he's not going to give us a shot. We had been enhancement talent for so long, but I think he appreciated all the work we did for him. And he gave us a shot, and they pushed us hard. And Windy City was great, too, don't get me wrong. And the funny thing about Windy City is I had a relationship with Windy City because I had a wrestling school in Milwaukee that I called Brew City Wrestling, and he helped fund that. And so I was feeding guys to his TV and back and forth type thing, and Christopher Daniels was a guy I helped train and all that. And basically, bottom line is that we had a really good working relationship, and Sam did a lot for us. He was great. But then, yeah, Greg gave us a shot, actually. And we were shocked. I mean, honestly, they pushed us hard. I mean, we really, I don't think we ever actually lost a match the whole time. It was, I think, I'm not sure, but I think if that promotion had stayed alive, we would have eventually gotten the tag straps.
Mm-hmm. And it was just unfortunate because that was, you know, part of the, I guess, the side effects of the older guard of the territory days that have all kind of fell in the at the feet of what McMahon was doing. But Vern, it really kind of hit us hard because, you know, being up here in AWA country, just to see the way it went. I mean, considering that the AWA still had some pretty good exposure when the afternoon shows. I remember coming home from school to watch it on ESPN. I mean, when they moved to the when they moved to the afternoons at 3. And there was things going on. There was attempts to try to pump some life into this company a little bit. And one of the things was the Team Challenge series, and another was sort of, I guess, this Eric Bischoff starting to kind of make his presence beyond just the behind the scenes sort of medial tasks role, to take a little bit more of a role in the company before he ended up, of course, the AWA folding, and of course we all know what happened with Eric.
Yeah, he at that time he truly was, because we used to see him in back and all that. At that time, he pretty much was just truly an announcer. I mean, he wasn't an influence in the AWA at all, and much credit to him to get where he got. But yeah, Vern was doing, he was still trying to hold his own and all that. And I thought that 3 o'clock slot was a pretty decent slot, and eventually USWA got it, which we were at that time too. But yeah, it was a shame. It was really a shame that Vern just couldn't keep it. He just didn't evolve. He just didn't have enough talent. He didn't pay enough. And I mean, at the end there, it was rough. Like, we'd do house shows. We ended up doing Minot. I think it was Minot, North Dakota. Because you get your booking sheet for the month, and it'd usually be just the TVs, and then there'd be maybe 6 house shows. I mean, you can guess what the pay was for that one.
Oh man, let me see. Hold on, I'm scratching my head here.
Even as the Hangman. Now this is the Hangman. Even doesn't matter.
Thinking. $150, boys. Strike again.
There you go. Yeah, we drove to Minot, North Dakota, which was from Milwaukee. I want to say maybe 16 hours, and we wrestled Buck Zumoff and Baron von Raschke, and then turned around and drove right back and nearly crashed our car because we couldn't stay awake. Got $150, and we pretty much saw the writing was on the wall, and it was the end of it and all that, and it did fold and all that. But yeah, in that Team Challenge series, I mean, our team won. Zbyszko team won. I'm still waiting for that portion of the $1 million check.
I thought Milliman was going to give you the cut of the check after he won the Battle Royal.
See him Sunday. I'm going to tell him. I'll say, listen, if you hold him out, I want it. But yeah, we're still waiting for that. But that was really, that was a rough time for AWA. But you know what? If you look at all the years of their greatness, I mean, overall, that was a tremendous territory, and it's a shame it ended the way it did. But it was, it was an amazing territory. We all grew up on it. It was amazing.
For sure. Boy, we might have to have you on for a second time here. The way that we've been cutting through just the AWA stuff with your career, this has been so much fun here as we've been progressing through this hour. We still got a little ways to go, of course, but it just been such a fun conversation. I just wanted to kind of step back and take a breath here. Yeah.
Listen, I'd be happy to be on again, but I guess as far as the AWA thing goes, so we did the AWA thing, and then that closed, and then what happened is, before it closed, I saw the writing on the wall, so I made a tape of all our AWA stuff, and I sent it to Puerto Rico because we wanted to get on the road. And I was shocked. I got a call from the Invader. You know Invader. We all know Invader's story.
Mm-hmm.
I got a call from Jose like 3 weeks later. Amigo, we love what we see. Please call me. This was on my answering machine, because at the time we had answering machines. So I call him back, and needless to say, like 3 weeks later, we were in Puerto Rico, which was pretty cool.
Talk about your Puerto Rico experience working down there. I do believe for Carlos and Jose, Invader 1. Talk about just the. I mean, you hear so many stories through the years of guys going down there, and just the situation with the fans. How a little overexcited, you could say, they could get at times with the things that they would throw. What was that atmosphere like at the time for you when you went down to Puerto Rico and worked in regards to the audience at those shows?
It was intense. Now, when we first went down, we only went down on a 2-week premise of we're just going to try it out. We didn't think that there was anything more going to happen. We were going to go down there for 2 weeks. We still both had full-time jobs in Milwaukee, and Bull had his wife here. And we went down there, and they loved us. And on the last night, they gave us the straps from the Super Medicos, which was one of the Jose Estrada and his son. And we're like, well, that's odd. Why are they giving us the straps? We haven't even committed to come back. But we did our match and all that, and it was intense. But at that time, we didn't have a lot of heat. But then when they convinced us to come back, We had major heat, and I could tell you some crazy stories about, some stuff that happened. But what happened basically is we went down for 2 weeks thinking we were just going in for 2 weeks to try it out, and they gave us the straps, which I guess was their kind of way to get us back. And then he called me a week later, and he goes, "Amigo, we want you to come back." And I go, "Well, we have jobs, Jose." And he goes, "Well, we'll pay you $1,000 a week, and we're going to push you hard, and I've got this really, really good idea for an angle." And I talked to Bull, and he said, "All right." And we went back, and that's when did you ever see that angle that we did with Invader at all?
No. I've only just seen, in print, but talk a little bit about that, because that's very fascinating. I mean, especially anything involving Puerto Rico and Invader. I mean, I want to hear your story about your time with working with Invader.
It was strange because, the angle was amazing, and Eric Embry was booking at the time, but Invader was kind of still running. Whenever you're booking in Puerto Rico, it's still always Carlos and Invader. So what happened is the angle was basically that we wrestled Carlos Colon and Invader at the TV studios, which was in Miramar on the naval base right in San Juan, and there would always be the same crowd there every week, and we wrestled them. And the deal is that at the end of the match, they caught a quick one on us, and then we laid him out, and we hung Invader. We'll put him on his back, and then I held his legs, and we hung him, for like a long time. A bunch of faces fed, but the heels would come out and stop him, so it was like a combination effort type thing. And eventually there was nobody left except for TNT, which eventually became Savio Vega in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And he came out and he turned face. He was a heel at the time he turned face. So needless to say, this was a huge angle. Invader actually went to the hospital and stayed there for over a week. And during that time, we had so much heat. There were times, I'm not kidding you, these are all honest stories. One time I came back, somebody had thrown a dart actually in my back. I sat down, and there was an actual dart completely in my back. I don't know why they chose a dart, but I didn't even know it. And Bo goes, "Dude, you got a dart in your back." And he pulled it out, and I was like hoping it wasn't poisonous, which it wasn't, because I'm still here. We had urine thrown on us. I had M80s thrown at me. One time I was wrestling Invader, and somebody threw a softball, and I saw it coming. Well, maybe it was a hard ball. I don't know what it was. One of them kind of balls. And I saw it coming my way, and it hit me right in the eye and bruised the hell out of my eye. That's a crazy territory. One time, Dickie Murdoch incited a riot at the studio where he punched a fan, and they came barreling into the dressing room, and we were kicking the door and trying to hold it. And eventually it just got crazy, and the police came, and we had to jump in the back of a paddy wagon. These are honest stories. And they took us to the police station, and then we just had to get brought back to our cars from there. That is a very intense territory, but at the same time, the island is beautiful. The trips are easy. The money was decent, and you got to work 5 nights a week. It was pretty cool.
Man, you talk about, you mentioned, the Invader and Carlos Colon and Dick Murdoch you got to work with down there as well. And another guy that was doing the booking, you said, and a guy that you got a chance to work with too in the USWA in around 91. Eric Embry. I always enjoyed watching Eric, where, and I got a chance to, in the last couple of years to go back and watch some of his stuff with Southwestern, with Joe Blanchard's company when he was younger. His world-class work was very, very good. And some of the internet, the stuff he did in Puerto Rico. This was a guy that could bleed buckets, but he also had just buckets of charisma to go with those buckets of blood. Eric Embry, boy, what a guy for the business.
He was talented. You're exactly right. That was a very underrated guy. Very talented, great charisma, good booker. He's the guy who actually booked us to USWA. What happened is we were in, I'll make it short, me and Bull were in Puerto Rico as the Hangman, and we had our great run. And, we sold out stadiums with the whole Carlos, and then once Invader came back, and it was just amazing, and blah, 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 blah. But what happened is Eric left, and he said to us, he goes, "Hey, if you guys, I'm going to USWA to book for Lawler." He goes, "If you guys, once you finish up here, if you want to come there, give me a call." Well, what happened is eventually, once we did drop the straps to Bronco and Invader, I called Eric on a payphone, because back then you didn't have cell phones, and he said, "Yeah, when do you guys want to start?" And that's how we got to USWA. And true to his word, he was good to us. We got the straps from Lawler and Jarrett. We won them at the Mid-South Coliseum against Lawler and Jarrett, and we had a decent run there. The money was horrible, and the trips were long, and we were used to making $1,000 a week, and now we were making $300 a week. So that was a little brutal, and that did cause the demise of the Hangman. Actually, that's why we broke up, was because it just was such a tough experience. But it was cool because Eric did stand true to his word and brought us down there.
Mm-hmm. And you also, it was like you went from one promotion to the other, but you also maintained some exposure thanks to the ESPN show with the USWA. And I remember watching plenty of that. But I also, end up, through the years reading books and biographies and other stuff, finding out about just how, just how grueling that could be, because Jarrett not only had Memphis, but he had Dallas. And sometimes there'd be this thing where you guys would do a taping, at the Sportatorium and go up to Memphis, or was it vice versa? I mean, talk about putting in some major hours just to make these tapings and to get these runs. What was that like? I mean, the miles that you put on alone could have been arduous enough, and then have the insult of what you guys were taking home per night.
I can honestly tell you that was by far the most grueling time, and I enjoyed it, actually. Me personally, I did, but Bull not so much. But bottom line is it was 2,000 miles a week, and making $300 a week. Now, and the funny thing is, it wasn't just me and Bull. We stayed at the Capri Motel, which was actually the Scotland Inn is where we stayed at. And then right down the street, the Congress Inn, was Tom Pritchard and Stone Cold Steve Austin, who wasn't Stone Cold at the time. And I had a Nissan Sentra, so I would pick us up, and then we'd go down there and get those guys. And we'd drive to the towns, and Steve would literally just cook a big pot of potatoes and live off of those all week, because we just didn't have any money. I mean, it's weird when you think about these people watching us on TV, and you're just basically starving. And we would wrestle Monday in Memphis, Tuesday at the Louisville Garden, Wednesday in Evansville, and then Thursday we would have a spot show. And after the spot show, they designate an area where we'd meet. We'd bring our cars there, and we'd hop on that tour bus, faces and heels, Dundee, me, Robert Fuller, Jarrett. Lawler wouldn't be on there, but it'd be all the other guys. Lawler didn't do Dallas. But we would all go down to Dallas, so we'd have to drive all night long to Dallas, and we'd get in about 10 a.m. in Dallas after the Thursday night spot show. And then we'd be at the Sportatorium, which is a cool place to be, a lot of history there. But then you've got, 6 hours to sit there till the tapings, till the show starts, and then you do the taping, and then you'd hop back on the bus, and you would drive all the way back up to Memphis, get your car, and then you'd have to drive to the studio and do live TV at 10 a.m. And then you do the live TV. Now, we had the straps, so we were like a main thing. And then after you did your live TV, you'd have to hop in your car and drive to Nashville, which is where we lived, and you do the Nashville Gardens that night. And then you would have off on Sunday, and you'd start that whole routine all over again for $300.
Wow, what a grind that was. And
yeah,
I mean, geez, the miles. I want to talk about some of the TV, because, again, there's another, when you think about Memphis, some of us fans, who are out of the area, as far as what the TV show could be picked up, we've been able, thankfully, through the benefit of YouTube through recent years, to be able to check out Memphis TV. And what a really legendary show that was on Saturday mornings, because when they talked about how those ratings in that Memphis market would rival stuff like, Dallas or Monday Night Football or something like that in comparison to their share as far as how many people in that Memphis area were watching it. And that could be very indicative as to what the houses were at the Mid-South Coliseum that Monday. But the television, it sounded like a grind traveling, but boy, what a legendary institution that was. When you think about Dave Brown, you think about Lance Russell and Corey Macklin later on. But what a show that Memphis TV was.
It was really cool, to be honest with you. I mean, we were getting underpaid, but we were very happy to be part of it. I mean, like you said, there was so many names that came through there. It really, truly was a great territory, and it was sad to see it kind of winding down. We were at the tail end of it. I remember literally being in the Louisville Garden, and we got there early, and I was sitting in the fans weren't even in yet. I was sitting in one of the stands, and Steve came out, Stone Cold, and he's like, "Hey, man, I got a call from Dusty. I think I'm leaving." And I'm like, "Wow, man, congrats, dude. That's awesome." And I mean, the guys were moving on because the territory was just dying, and it wasn't going to be much longer. And what happened is we had the straps, and we ended up getting our notice because my partner, unfortunately, got kind of involved with our manager's girl, who was Jamie Dundee, and that caused a lot of heat, of course. And so we got our notice, and then we left there, and then I came back to Milwaukee. And then when I came back to Milwaukee, he stayed there. He lived in Memphis from that point on with his new girl, and I lived in Milwaukee. And then at that time, I started thinking to myself, I need to find a new hangman partner, you know, because he sold me the gear. He goes, I don't want to do the hangman anymore. Because do you remember when he was Bull Payne?
Yep, I do. I definitely do. Watching him.
Well, Donna, the girl Donna, when they did the what was that, Global Wrestling Federation?
Yes, exactly what they did out of Dallas, the tapings at the Sportatorium.
Yes. He started doing that with Donna, which was the girl that he had his little fling with. He left his wife for, and they started doing the Global. And we had gotten fired because that was Jamie's living girlfriend at the time, and he was our manager. So obviously, once that all came out, that didn't sit very well with Eric Embry. And he goes, I brought you guys in from Puerto Rico, and this is what happened. And I'm like, I have nothing to do with it. So bottom line is, long story short, he became Bull Payne. He said, I don't want to be a hangman anymore. And the shameful thing about it is, this is such a bummer. His story's version is different than mine, but this is the truth. We left there, and we hadn't even left yet. And I called J.J. Dillon up in WWE. And I go, JJ, this is Mike. I'm one of the Texas Hangmen. He goes, I'm familiar with you guys. And at the time, we were in the top 10 in Pro Wrestling Illustrated's tag teams. I mean, we'd been, you know, we had the Puerto Rico straps. We had the USWA straps. We'd been around in the AWA. We had a good run. And I said, we really want to come in for a tryout. And he goes, well, when do you want to come in? I go, well, when's your next thing? He goes, 3 weeks. And I go, let's do it. And he booked us for, it was Hartford, and I forgot what the other town was. So I called Bull up, and I go, hey, Bull, we've got a trial for WB, and he's sending me the plane tickets. And he goes, well, I'm thinking about doing this thing with Donna, which was Samantha. And he goes, I really don't want to wear the hood anymore and all that. And I'm like, well, think about it and let me know. Well, eventually he decided he didn't want to do it. So then I called JJ back, and I go, JJ, I go, my partner's met a girl, and he's not interested in doing the hangman thing. He goes, well, we already sent the tickets. Do you want to come? I go, yeah. So I went there, and I ended up wrestling Coco Beware and Jim Powers and had tryout matches. But, you know, the hangman at that time was one guy, wasn't very impressive. So I didn't get hired. But the bottom line is that that's how the hangman broke up, and that's when I called him, and I said, hey, can I will you send me the gear or whatever, and I can get a new partner? And he sent me the gear, and that's how the next evolution of the hangman became.
Mm-hmm. And we're getting a little bit close to our time limit here on the program. Yeah. I think, the next time we come around to getting the chat again, which I hopefully is maybe sometime before the year's up, we can kind of start up your story right where you guys, parted ways as the original Texas Hangman. He went to be Bull Payne. You ended up keeping the legacy of the Hangman alive. I think that's a good place, a good spot where we could start off next time, because I know there's so much more in regards to chapters and content in the story of your pro wrestling life, my friend.
That would be great. You know, I would love to talk about my time with Tough Tom, how we became Disorderly Conduct, our times in Japan. I got to team with Cactus one time. I was there ringside for the match with him and Terry Funk. It'd be great. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I realize I get a little long-winded, but there's just, it's a lot of stuff I'm very excited about from my past,
Well, here's the thing. Don't feel like you're being long-winded, because this is the type of program where we are a long-form interview show. This is meant for you, my friend. So if you feel like you're getting long-winded, you're not. The audience is enjoying this. This is good stuff. This is your life story in the ring, my friend. So don't feel like that for one moment, that you're going too long or you're going whatever. I would just say, keep it going. Stretch it, man. Let's keep these stories coming, man. These are great memories.
Nice. I'm waiting for part 2, buddy. You just let me know.
Absolutely. And yes, this wraps up this edition of Rasslin' Memories Then and Now. For Mike Moran, I'm Glen Braget. So long, and thanks for listening.